So hello everybody, this is EXT37 Mono and I'm Matt. I wanted to introduce the ZX Spectrum 128 Plus 2. It has an internal cassette drive. This actually doesn't belong to me, it's a friend's, and I am going to try powering it up and playing his favourite game, which is Football Director. I've never played Football Director. I know that it was connected to the TV through the RF connector, like many 8-bit computers were of the time. So we'll replicate that to begin with, and then potentially we'll look at the future about seeing if we can do a couple of mods to take advantage of the RGB output. So let's get started. We'll check out very quickly 128 Basic. the keyboard is ever so slightly off center. Very difficult. Whee! Don't know how you get back to the menu. Oh, okay, so there's an edit key on the keyboard which seems to bring up the menu, and we can go to XM. That brings us back to tape loader. Okay, so we're going to hit play. And see what happens. Okay, so it's no surprise that the Spectrum tape drive isn't working. It's unfortunate. Everything else appears to be okay, but you can hear when the tape is playing, it doesn't sound like a normal cassette tape loading one of these old 8-bit machines. I tried downloading a TZX file, which is a tape rip of an existing game, and that sounded very much more like I was expecting. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this apart and see if we can do a few repairs. So first of all, we're going to take these screws out. That's for one in each cover. So it looks like there's a screw missing there. Take this screw out very gently. So I'm not trying to break this. And we've got another screw in this corner as well. What I'm going to do is just gently unplug these connectors that the tape drive is connected to. You can just flip this over to that. So at this stage I'm just going to inspect the board and the tape mechanism to see if there's any obvious faults. Got to be very careful with these ribbon cables. Now I'm just going to remove this board to see if there's any damage on the other side or any faults on the other side. Now I'm in two minds here. Either one option is that we repair the tape drive, or the second option is that we come off the tape drive somehow, or certainly off the connector, and run an external audio jack in so that we can connect, say, a mobile phone and play back the tape audio to that. So as I'm looking at the board, there's no obvious faults on the rear. It also gives me an opportunity though to double check all of the connections to see where we would probably break out from if we were to add an external audio jack for either an external tape player or a mobile phone. I think the first thing we're going to try is adding clip leads to where I believe we should break off from the board to see if we can plug in an external tape drive and play our cassette tape that way. We'll try adding clip leads directly to the board first and hook a external tape drive in that way. We just need to pop the breakout board back on. Okay. Okay, so what we've got going on here is the Spectrum Plus 2 with the breakout cable connected to a audio cable that then connects to the tape deck from my Spectrum 48K. So now we'll plug in the Spectrum Plus 2. And we get nothing. So what have I done wrong? What have I done wrong? Ah, that's another connection I haven't plugged in. Go into tape loader and press play. As I say, I have no idea if this is going to work. Now what is interesting is we don't have the coloured border around the edge like we did when we had the tape deck actually hooked up. We don't have any sound coming out at all. That could be because I wired it into the wrong connection inside. There were obviously the data in and data out, and I've just made an assumption that it is that way around. So there's a few things to try here, so I'm going to cancel that off. I just want to check that these connections are actually working. Okay, so as far as I can tell, everything is making contact. All I've done this time is I've swapped over, or sorry, added in both the channels from the stereo cable. Well, that sounds a lot better because that sounds more like what I would be expecting a cassette tape to sound like on an 8-bit machine. So I suspect the tape is in relative condition. Whether it's perfect or not is another matter, but it's certainly in this scenario playing much better than the inbuilt cassette player. Okay, so like I thought, there's something else we're going to have to do here. So let's unplug it. But all in all, it sounds as if we're going in the right direction. We've managed to get some sound to come through out of the external tape player and into the Spectrum. Okay, all right. So we've got the right cables, we think. So the best option probably is to hook those cables up to this board. Need to take this audio board off again. So we worked out that the white and ground. So white and black, basically. We'll put one screw back in, perhaps. If this proves to work, we can obviously solder these cables onto this board. We can just tap off these two points. It's very unintrusive. It's ideal, really, but before I get the soldering iron out, I just want to prove that it does work. The external connector that I've got here on the back of the audio in, we're going to connect the external tape cassette player. The sound's coming through. But the border, I feel like that border should be there. I don't know. I never owned a Spectrum Plus 2, so I don't know what it's supposed to do. But I feel like that border should be there. Convinced that was going to work. I'll let it run and see what happens. Well, as you could probably guess, it didn't work. So let's just solder the connector onto the board. Right, let's get this hooked up on the other bench. So unfortunately that hasn't been a success. We have made some progress though. The external tape loading idea seems to be certainly a way forward. We've learnt that the internal tape drive doesn't work. The Spectrum itself seems to be loading absolutely fine though. It seems to be running and operating. There does seem to be a fault somewhere along the lines with either something that I'm doing, which is quite likely. Also, it's entirely possible we might be able to repair the internal tape drive. So I'm going to park it here on this video, and then next time we're going to have a go at repairing the internal tape drive, potentially the external tape drive as well, and also seeing if we can upscale the graphics slightly. The Spectrum Plus 2 does output an RGB signal, and there are many projects on the internet at the moment about converting RGB into HDMI, which would be a really great step forward. So we'll have to leave it there, and I'll see you next time.